We were 3 days from closing when the deal almost collapsed. The buyer was approved. The inspection passed. The paperwork was clean. Then the HOA president refused to sign off. According to her, the association had the authority to deny the sale based on compliance concerns. She claimed unresolved issues made the transfer impossible. The buyer's agent panicked. The closing attorney stalled. And suddenly, months of preparation were hanging on one signature. But when I read the state statute carefully, I found something the HOA president clearly hadn't. She didn't have the legal power to block the sale at all. And once that became clear, everything moved very fast. Selling the house wasn't rushed. It had been planned carefully. The market was strong, the timing made sense, and the property showed well. Within days of listing, we had a solid offer. The buyer was qualified, financing approved, inspection clean. Everything moved exactly the way you hope it does. Closing was scheduled. The paperwork began stacking neatly into place. In most HOA neighborhoods, there's one additional step before finalizing a sale: an association resale package. It typically includes account balances, compliance status, and a standard acknowledgement form confirming the property is in good standing. Routine. Administrative. Not controversial. I requested the resale certificate early to avoid surprises. That's when the delay started. The HOA president responded saying she needed to review the file. A few days passed. Then she mentioned there were ongoing compliance concerns. Nothing major. No formal violation hearing. Just minor items that had either been disputed or already addressed. Still, she didn't issue the certificate. Instead, she stated the association could not approve the sale until all outstanding matters were resolved. The language felt heavier than necessary. It implied discretion, as if the HOA could decide whether the property transfer moved forward. The buyer's agent started asking questions. The closing attorney flagged the missing certificate. The lender requested confirmation that the property was eligible for transfer under association rules. What had been smooth began to wobble, not because of financing, but because of uncertainty. That's when I pulled out the governing documents. Then I checked state law. Because HOAs can require disclosure paperwork. They can confirm balances. They can certify compliance status. But denying a sale outright? That's a very different claim. And the more I read, the more I realized something critical. The association didn't have approval power. They only had reporting power. And those two things are not the same. The closing date didn't move. The clock did. Every day the resale certificate wasn't issued, the pressure increased. The buyer had already locked their interest rate. The lender had scheduled final underwriting review. The title company needed HOA confirmation to finalize the settlement statement. Without that document, everything stalled. I emailed the HOA president again. She replied that the board was evaluating whether the property met community standards for transfer. That wording caught my attention immediately. Evaluating for transfer? That wasn't language from a bylaws. It sounded like authority that didn't exist. I asked directly, under which section of the governing documents does the HOA have the right to deny a sale? The response avoided the question. Instead, she cited association discretion and referenced compliance concerns, minor exterior issues that had never been escalated to hearing level, never resulted in formal judgment, and certainly never triggered anything close to transfer prohibition. Meanwhile, the buyer's agent began getting nervous. If the HOA wouldn't confirm good standing, the lender could withdraw. If the lender withdrew, the buyer could walk. If the buyer walked, we'd have to relist, losing time, leverage, and potentially thousands of dollars. The HOA president knew this. The delay wasn't accidental. It was leverage. She began suggesting that if I paid all outstanding charges immediately and agreed to resolve certain cosmetic matters before closing, the board might reconsider its position. Might. That word mattered, because the balance she referenced included disputed fines and administrative add-ons that had never been formally adjudicated. Paying them under pressure would effectively validate them. I contacted the association's management company directly. They admitted something revealing. The HOA does not approve sales. They issued disclosure certificates. The property transfer is governed by contract law and state statute, not board preference. That's when I expanded my search. Under state law, HOAs can require a resale disclosure package. They can report outstanding assessments, but they cannot unreasonably withhold documentation required for transfer. And unless the governing documents explicitly grant a right of first refusal, which ours did not, the association cannot block or deny a sale. There it was, black and white. No approval authority, no veto power, no discretionary transfer control. The HOA president wasn't withholding approval. She was withholding paperwork to simulate approval authority. And that distinction changed everything. Because once the buyer's attorney saw the statute, the tone of the conversation shifted. Instead of asking me to fix it, they asked one question. Would you like us to formally demand compliance? That's when the balance of power began to tilt. The buyer's attorney sent the letter the next morning. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't aggressive. It simply cited the statute. Under state law, the association was required to provide a resale disclosure certificate within a specific time frame. Failure to do so could expose the HOA to liability for damages resulting from delayed or obstructed closing. The letter gave them 48 hours. For the first time, the pressure wasn't on me. It was on the board. The HOA president responded quickly, but carefully. She stated the board was reviewing its obligations. The language had changed. The tone was no longer about denying the sale. It was about compliance with statutory requirements. 2 days later, the resale certificate arrived. No conditions attached. No approval language. No veto authority asserted. Just a standard disclosure form listing the account balance and confirming there were no pending legal actions preventing transfer. The balance listed was significantly lower than what had previously been implied. Several disputed fines were no longer included. Administrative charges quietly disappeared. Closing moved forward immediately. At the settlement table, nothing about the paperwork suggested a battle had just been fought over it. The transfer recorded. The funds cleared. The house changed hands. And the most telling moment came afterward. At the next HOA meeting, the president referred to the delay as a misinterpretation of association authority. Not a denial, not an enforcement action, a misinterpretation. But the statute had never been ambiguous. The association never had approval power over the sale. They had reporting power. And once that legal distinction was put in writing by someone outside the HOA's internal circle, the illusion of control dissolved almost instantly. After closing, everything became quieter. The resale certificate process was updated. Deadlines were clarified. Language about approval disappeared from association communications. What had once been implied authority was rewritten into something far more precise. The board never issued an apology. They didn't need to, because the change in tone said enough. Neighbors who were considering selling reached out privately. Some admitted they'd assumed the HOA had final say over transfers. Others said they would have paid anything demanded just to avoid risking a deal. That was the part that stayed with me. It wasn't just about my sale. It was about how easily confidence can substitute for authority when no one challenges it. HOAs can require documentation. They can report balances. They can enforce assessments properly recorded. But they cannot invent approval rights that state law never granted. The sale went through. The buyer moved in. And the next time the HOA sent a resale packet to any homeowner, it arrived on time without hesitation. Because once the law had been cited clearly and publicly, the leverage shifted. Not through confrontation, not through outrage, but through one simple correction. Authority only exists where the law allows it. And this time, the law moved faster than the threat.